Happy Halloween! In this episode of Satansplain, I'll be answering some listener mail with some questions on satanic ritual, ranging from the ritualistic expression of wearing satanic symbols, to use of the Infernal Names, to finding Satanists for full satanic group ritual, along with satanically philosophical takes on respecting life.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M here with Satansplain. The last several episodes of Satansplain have been 100% me ranting. And yeah, you could say, well, that's every episode of Satansplain, but what I mean is I wasn't responding to listener mail or doing Satanecdotes and that sort of stuff. I am still glad I made those episodes because there was a lot I felt I had to say, and I felt I had to be thorough about it all. But in this episode, we are going to get back to answering some listener mail and, of course, throw in a satanic anecdote near the end. As I record this, it is the week of Halloween 2024. Lots of Satanists, myself included, like to do some form of satanic ritual on Halloween night. Personally, I have done some sort of formalized ritual every single Halloween night for the past 35 years. It's different every year, but it's a tradition I've kept up. And coincidentally, several of the questions I received concern satanic ritual. So with that, let's get right to the listener mail. Brent writes, I am very new to the Satanic Bible. It resonated deeply with me. I feel I found my truth I have been looking for, but I live in the Bible Belt. Nobody would get it. I've listened to your show about how there isn't a satanic community, and it makes sense. However, isn't it natural to seek out other like-minded individuals? I would like to have at least one other person to talk to about these things with. However, online I have struggled. It is riddled with spam and people who know nothing in truth. Do you have any recommendations for what I should do? I don't want to change the structure. So that email was from Brent. I got another email from Mark asking the same sort of thing. So I wrote back to the both of them and said that yes, there is no satanic community in the same sort of way you see notions like the gay community or the black community, where you have a minority demographic who only operates as a collective and is making certain social demands on how to be treated by society, and so on. I talked about all this in Satansplain episode number 61, and there is also a great essay on the topic in the Satanic Scriptures, Myth of the Satanic Community. Of course, this does not change the fact that we Satanists do occasionally meet up in person with other Satanists for some activity or another. In fact, whether a person is or isn't a Satanist, I think that if you have beliefs or worldviews, or hobbies for that matter, which happen to be held only by a minority of people, then it's quite natural to want to seek out people who are like yourself in that regard. I don't think it's conformity for nonconformists to want to seek out and enjoy the company of a few fellow nonconformists. And when it comes to Satanism, I do encourage Satanists to do that, to go seek out and meet other Satanists in person, even if it's only on rare occasion. So I pointed Brent to the end of Satansplain episode number 49 and also episode 17, because in those ones I give some suggestions, and suffice to say, there have been Church of Satan members in the Bible Belt who, even before the internet, were still able to meet up in person with other Satanists, even during the 1980s Satanic Panic. So, if a Satanist living before the internet and during the Satanic Panic and in the Bible Belt could still find a way to meet up with other Satanists, then there's really no reason why a Satanist can't meet up with another Satanist in 2024. It may not be easy if you put up an ad in public somewhere saying, "Hey, I'm a Satanist and would like to meet other Satanists." That unfortunately will probably attract will attract harassment from Christians, for starters. It may attract some lunatics who are not Satanists, but, hear voices in their head and they're devil worshippers. It may attract dweebs of Kevin Soling's cult, whom I talked about in the previous episode. So you'll have to sift through those replies for sure. And even if a real Satanist does see your sign, well, it's no guarantee that he or she is interested in hanging out with you. I mean, I know if I saw a sign like that in my town, I'd be a little wary, a little cautious, especially if the place they wanted to meet up, at was not a public area, or not a even well-lit public area. But again, there are still ways to do it. I myself still meet up in person with fellow Satanists on occasion. So listen to those particular Satansplain episodes that I mentioned for details. Raquel has an email here. Raquel writes, "Greetings and hail, Magister Bill. I am an avid listener of Satansplain and wanted to take a moment to thank you for your time and effort in putting together the podcast. It's been both enlightening and enjoyable to follow." Well, thank you, Raquel. I have a question, or perhaps it's more of a request for advice. I'll let you be the judge of that. This comes from your episode on rituals, which inspired me to research one for myself. I came across a satanic rite of dedication, which is a ritual that's in the Satanic Scriptures, page 226, and am interested in performing this ritual. It mentions that I must complete the initial steps of the satanic ritual from the Satanic Bible. When I reached step 5, the invocation to Satan and the Infernal Names, I understand that I can choose whichever names resonate with me personally. Is that correct? Since this is my first ritual, I want to ensure I'm doing everything correctly, especially as I plan to perform it on Halloween. I'm nearly finished preparing my altar, just missing a chalice. If you could recommend any sites, resources, or beginner-friendly books on rituals that might help someone like me, I would greatly appreciate it. So I wrote back to Raquel. First of all, with the Infernal Names, yes, that is correct. But in case there are any listeners who may have stumbled onto this podcast and are not sure of what we're referring to here, let me give you a quick background. Satanism is not simply reverse Christianity. It's not a religion where we look at what Christians are doing and then do the opposite, or copy exactly what they're doing and just do a satanic parody of it. Satanism is a religion that is a carnal religion. It rejects the spiritual, and as I've said before, it is philosophically just as anti-Buddhist or anti-Islamic or anti-Judaic as it is anti-Christian. However, given that Satanism was formulated as a religion by the Church of Satan, and that started in 20th century America, the most fitting adversarial character in this zeitgeist is Satan. Thus, Satan is the most apt mascot for what we stand for. Having said all of that, we do recognize that other religions and other cultures throughout the centuries have had their own superstitions with deities, of an evil variety. Humans have always seemed to need a scapegoat, and I guess it's not too surprising that a lot of these so-called evil deities of past religions were described with some qualities which we Satanists would praise as being satanic. Themes like lust, greed, vengeance, rebellion, and so on. Some of these gods, in fact, were not even originally considered evil, but they embraced themes which Christianity and other religions wanted to brand as evil, and, well, that's what ended up happening. Now, the Satanic Bible includes a long list of gods and goddesses like this from world mythology, and we call this list the Infernal Names. And one of the ways we use the Infernal Names is to incorporate them into satanic ritual. As I say in the Satansplain introduction, Satanism is a non-theistic religion. We embrace atheism, which is simply the position of not believing in the literal existence of deities. But as I also say, we recognize the psychological power of rituals and symbolism. It's theater, it's psychodrama. So just as we make use of Satan as a symbol, you can use these other infernal names as well. So to answer the question, yes, when it comes to that part of the standard satanic ritual, you can choose whichever names you want from the list and however many you want. Personally, I typically select about 5 to 10 names, maybe, tops. I've done other rituals where the person leading it ended up choosing more. That's fine. As for which names to choose, yes, the ones that resonate with you personally are, of course, a good bet. I would also, however, consider the theme of your ritual. So, for example, if you're doing a conjuration of destruction, maybe pick some infernal names in the list which, have something to do with that. Themes of destruction or vengeance or, those sorts of things. Likewise, if you're doing a conjuration of lust, consider ones described as being associated with sex and lust and so on. Now, Raquel also says that since this is her first ritual, she wants to ensure that she's doing everything correctly. I've talked about this concept before. You can go to Satansplain episodes 48 and 49. But I see some Satanists who end up falling into one of two extremes, both of which I'd say are bad. I've seen people who say, oh, well, there's no wrong way to do a ritual, and it's all about me. So I can throw structure out the window and do anything I want, because following any kind of guidelines or directions is being a sheep. No, sorry, that's not how this works. There are indeed wrong ways of doing a ritual. If you go into the ritual chamber with your smartphone in one hand and you're trying to play Candy Crush Saga with that hand while you point the sword and do invocations with the other, that's a good example of a wrong way to do satanic ritual. And then you have the other extreme, though, which is a Satanist who perhaps may be so concerned about getting things perfect that they never get around to doing a first ritual at all, or are too anxious about things going wrong. I would say you want to be somewhere in the middle. You don't want to be either of those extremes. You want to have enough self-discipline to organize and have some kind of process, but at the same time, don't expect perfection. Sometimes mishaps happen. A candle goes out or the music you programmed isn't long enough, but a little planning does go a long way, and sometimes you just have to act fast on the mishaps and move on. In this example of constructing an altar and just missing a chalice, I would argue that if you just want to cut corners on your very first ritual and use some other drinking vessel for the chalice, like, I don't know, a wine glass or something like that you may have handy, then you can just do that. And finally, as for recommended sites for beginner-friendly books on ritual, I told Raquel that I really don't have any I would suggest. I sincerely believe that the Satanic Bible is enough, though books like the Satanic Rituals and We Are Satanists also elaborate on the topic, as do a couple of essays from the Devil's Notebook. Speaking of ritual, I remember getting a message from somebody asking for suggestions on what to do for a first ritual. I forget who said it. And this is why I always say on the show to email me directly with your questions, because I have people who sometimes message me through social media on, one of my different pages or accounts, and I don't always end up seeing them or remembering where I saw the message. Anyway, it is true that the rituals you see in the book, The Satanic Rituals, that book, they're group rituals, and I do still encourage Satanists to meet up with other Satanists in person for a group ritual. I mean, at least once in your lives. But the standard 13-step ritual in the Satanic Bible is something that any Satanist can do. I know that it's set up so that the central focus is one of the 3 conjurations, compassion, lust, or destruction. That's steps 9 and 10 out of the 13. But you can just replace those 2 steps with whatever theme you want, really. You could just write up a little declaration of something and read it at that point, or read some verses from the Book of Satan out loud, read some or all of, that first of the 4 parts of the Satanic Bible. In fact, that's something you can try. You can make a ritual that way. So, you do the setup with the invocation and all that. You read those excerpts from the book, and then you do the closing steps. And likewise, as already mentioned, there is the rite of dedication that's in the Satanic Scriptures. And I have another question here, which kind of ties in with ritual, so I think I'll just read this now. Also ties in with the false notion of satanic community. I think it was in the previous episode of Satansplain, or maybe the one before that, I talked about how no public cause has ever been helped by having a bunch of Satanists show up to be seen in public, standing with that cause in solidarity. It's baffling to me how many people, especially younger people, can be so obsessed with their hatred for Christianity and Christian theocracy that they never stop to realize how stupid and self-defeating this idea is. This idea of trying to endorse a cause publicly in the name of Satanism. Nobody wants an endorsement from Satanists. That's because, so far as society is concerned, Satan is the bad guy, and thus Satanists are the bad guys. Now, the solution is not to try to whitewash Satanism and demand acceptance from society. It also doesn't mean that Satanists are somehow forbidden to join in on some cause or another as individuals. The example I think I gave an episode or two ago is that, for example, if you're a Satanist and you believe that an environmental cause is in your best interest to fight for, then yeah, go ahead and do that. What I think I said specifically was, yeah, you could have 100 Satanists go to an environmentalism protest march, waving satanic banners and claiming to be supporting that particular cause in the name of Satanism, but that wouldn't accomplish anything, really. What would be far more effective is just having 10 Satanists hide their pentagram necklaces and show up for that rally without mentioning Satanism at all, just being there as fellow environmentalists. Even more effective, though, would probably be to just have 1 or 2 Satanists hiding their pentagrams and do actual work, like volunteering to clean up pollution or getting a petition going or something, something besides holding a sign and being angry. Anyway, just my view here. But I mention all of this because I got a question here from Zachary. He was talking about this notion, which he's heard from other Satanists refer to, of tucking in the Baphomet, which is in a more general sense, it means not making your identity as a Satanist known in a given situation. So more literally, it refers to having a sigil of Baphomet medallion and wearing it hidden under your shirt rather than out and in view. Now, Zachary's question was, why is it tuck in the Baphomet rather than leave the Baphomet at home? So Zachary was arguing that it doesn't make sense why someone would need to wear the Baphomet everywhere. So I asked Zachary, have you ever had a piece of jewelry you wore frequently? He said he still didn't understand. What is the purpose if it's going to be hidden? Is it because you like the feel of the material or something? So I said, okay, so you don't wear jewelry. Do you have any tattoos? Do you have tattoos? And, namely ones which may not often be visible. He said, no, he only has one tattoo, and it's visible, namely when he has a short-sleeve shirt. But then he said, wait a minute, come to think of it, it is a Baphomet, which admittedly I can't leave at home. So I guess I answered my own question. But I further elaborated, and I told him, I have a sigil of Baphomet necklace, which I wear 24/7. Now, hardly all Satanists opt to do this. It's not a requirement in Satanism to wear some kind of jewelry or another, aside from maybe some specific rituals that are in the satanic rituals. But for casual wear, no, we don't have any kind of dress code. In any case, I'm a Satanist who decides to wear a sigil of Baphomet medallion, always on me, And for me, it's essentially a ritualistic expression. It is a symbol that is an extension of me. I am a Satanist, and the sigil is a symbol of Satanism. In fact, I will extend this symbolism even further. When Satanists are in an environment where they're wearing a sigil or a pentagram necklace under the shirt rather than leaving it at home, well, I would say that's more symbolic of what's going on here. Showing up to places secretly as a Satanist rather than leaving your Satanism at home. But I want to say one more thing about sigil necklaces and my personal choice to wear one 24/7. Zachary, he understands it now once we had this talk, but I have occasionally run into people who say they're Satanists, yet it turns out they somehow don't get this concept at all. It's not often, but I'll run into somebody who will say, well, I don't need a piece of jewelry to prove that I'm a Satanist. And, of course, they want to make sure all of us heard them say this. To which I say, it has nothing to do with proof. I don't wear a sigil to prove to myself or to other people that I'm a Satanist. It's the other way around. It's precisely because I know that I'm a Satanist and firmly grounded in those convictions that I choose to wear something symbolic of that. It's also why I joined the Church of Satan many years ago. It's not to justify who or what I am to other people, among other things. It's an act of asserting what's already true about me. Now, Zachary mentioned having a tattoo. I myself don't have any tattoos. What can I say? I'm a freak. But even though I have no tattoos and have no desire to get one, I completely understand the concept of getting a tattoo. I completely understand the concept of resonating with a certain symbol or a character or an idea and resonating with it so much that you want to literally have it be on your body permanently. I totally get that. And I'm not being sarcastic. I get that idea, the conviction of it. Yeah, I get that. But I don't understand some Satanists who are committed enough to the idea that they'll get a pentagram or a sigil of Baphomet tattoo, but they can't commit themselves to light some candles and do a formal satanic ritual. In fact, forget about Satanism itself. Let's dig deeper here. This concept of ritualized expression is something humans just naturally do. Whether it's with necklaces or flags or a band t-shirt or a sports jersey or something else. In fact, here's a pretty ubiquitous jewelry example. How about wedding rings? I am married and I wear a wedding ring. You could argue that I do it because it's a cultural tradition here in the Western world and that's where I'm from. Okay. But it's also a ritualized expression of something else I am. I am a husband. There's something to be said about having that reminder literally on your hand. Likewise, there's ritualistically something to be said about a Satanist like myself wearing a sigil of Baphomet medallion, even if it's under the shirt most of the time. But again, I will run into some people who seemingly don't get this idea at all. I don't mean the idea of marriage. I mean, some have no desire to get married, and that's fine. It's likewise fine if you're a Satanist, but you personally opt to not wear the jewelry or get a satanic tattoo. But what I'm saying is I've met people who don't get this idea of aesthetics and ritualized expression through symbols. You may hear the same sort of person who they'll say things like, well, I'm not going to get my girlfriend something for Valentine's Day. I'm not going to get something for my mother for Mother's Day, because if you love somebody, then you love that person more than one day of the year, and these are just made-up holidays for corporations and blah, blah. I don't know how many of you satanic ladies out there would put up with a guy like that. Sounds like a cheapskate to me. Or tying this back to Satanism, I remember one guy on a Satanism forum saying that he doesn't see the point in celebrating his birthday because, hey, it's ultimately an arbitrary day and every day of life should be celebrated with equal importance. To which I said, I don't know about you, but I got shit to do. So I like to schedule times where I can, enjoy some days or some events fully rather than trying to dilute that with the same days where I have to do laundry or go to the DMV to get a driver's license renewal or something like that. I guess I'm kind of rambling here, so let me finish with this. These kinds of attitudes don't really come off to me as free-spirited or satanically independent. It seems more like satanic sin number 9, lack of aesthetics. So, if you can't even grasp the idea of ritualized expression, even on a mundane level with sigil necklaces or Valentine's Day cards or whatever, and you also can't grasp the concept of being resourceful, then I don't know what to tell you. Let's take a break. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
Have you ever used a public toilet and noticed one of those dirty poems scrawled on the wall? Aren't they great? If you thought that sick shit was funny, you're gonna love this book series, Poems from the Bathroom Wall. These original poems are written in the same style and cover the same subject matter. Look these books up on lulu.com, that's LULU.com, and make sure that your filters are set to allow explicit content. Poems from the Bathroom Wall. Indulgence for the lowbrow connoisseur.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at Satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you are on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, or whatever the equivalent is, on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. And for all questions and correspondence, email me directly. The address is bill@satansplain.com. If you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up on Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. We also have a merch store. You can go to store.satansplain.com for that. And thank you, as always, to all of you who support the show in one way or another. Now, over on my other podcast, The Devil's Mischief, I have repaired an old Halloween special that hasn't been heard in years, cleaned it up and put it back out there. That's on RadioFreeSatan.com. In fact, on Radio Free Satan this week, you can hear a number of other shows doing Halloween themes. Reverend Jimmy Psycho is back for the 3rd year in a row with a Halloween special. You really got to hear that one for yourself. Also, the Metal Grotto and the Metro, those two shows on Radio Free Satan have their own Halloween specials as well this week. You can hear all of that and more on RadioFreeSatan.com. And now let's get back to the listener mail. Seth writes and says he's been listening to Satansplain and wants to know if it is at all possible to put Satansplain on YouTube Music. So Satansplain, of course, is available on YouTube, but I guess Seth pays for the YouTube Music service, which lets you leave out, their advertisements and lets you play clips on the YouTube mobile app in the background while you use other apps. I told Seth that I really don't see how or why I could do that, since Satansplain is not music and it's already on YouTube. Frankly, I think YouTube and its owner Google do some crooked things, and I've even been thinking of moving everything from YouTube to something else. But regardless, as I say in every episode of Satansplain, there are multiple ways to listen to Satansplain. So if the YouTube mobile app is giving you a problem, you can always just go straight to Satansplain.com, for example, and stream any episode from there. I'm pretty sure you can do that on a smartphone. Just minimize your browser after you click play and still hear it. Or maybe other apps like Audible or whatnot will let you do something similar. Yakov writes to say, I had some questions that were kind of hard for me to answer regarding the aspect of respecting life in Satanism. So I decided to ask my favorite magister, you. Well, first, thank you for all the work and effort that you put into your podcasts. You really help me with them. I'm always excited when there's a new episode. Well, thank you, Yakov. Continuing with the email. Now my questions. How much does it matter to value and respect the life of others? What is the Satanic standpoint on killing an innocent person for egotistic reasons? Would it be Satanic to kill an innocent person to save a loved one? Are there situations where self-preservation is not the highest law? For example, if I fucked something so completely up that I would have to kill a bystander to save myself, even when I brought myself into the situation. This is an aspect of Satanism where I am just very unsure, and I know that the questions are a moral dilemma. So I hope that you could give me some insight on that topic. Personally, I would say that I can't kill somebody who didn't give me permission or asked for the trouble, regardless of the situation, but I still want to know what you think about that. Okay, so I wrote back to Yakov and said that I do realize that these questions he's asking here are sincere. However, we do see people from time to time who ask questions like this in a more insincere way. In fact, it was kind of the subject of Satansplain episode number 1. I've seen some atheists as well as Christians who try playing this stupid game of hunting for contradictions. So what they do is see whatever it is you believe and skim through it and then try to present some hypothetical situation that would present a moral dilemma. So again, I'm not accusing this listener here of doing that, but I will run into dweebs now and then who say things like, well, what if you have this situation, in which case, if you did this thing, it would go against Satanic statement number 4, but if you didn't, you'd be breaking Satanic rule of the earth number 8. Checkmate, I win. Now, I would argue that these kinds of gotcha games don't really work against Satanism in the first place for several reasons. First of all, Satanism is not a religion for people who need to be taken by the hand on every little issue in life. We also don't claim to be a religion for everybody. We are ultimately based on rational self-interest. We're not claiming that our dogma is some sort of divinely inerrant set of laws handed down to humans from the clouds. The Satanic Bible, for example, is not viewed by Satanists as some sort of eternal word of God like the Christians view their Holy Bible. The Satanic Bible is not a book commanding how to believe, but describing what Satanism is, describing what we believe as Satanists, namely by describing what is and isn't Satanism, along with symbols and sample rituals that work in conjunction with all that. In fact, by the time the Satanic Bible came out in 1969, Satanism had already been established for 3 years with the formation of the Church of Satan, and even the Satanic Bible was still 3 years away from that. We still had established documents like the 11 Satanic Rules of the Earth, and essays and lectures from Anton LaVey, documentaries like Satanists, and so on. And again, I realize that this isn't what Yakov is doing here. He's asking because he wants some actual answers. He's not asking rhetorically for the sake of one-upmanship. So I told him this. When it comes to valuing and respecting the life of others, I would say it depends on what you mean by this. As a Satanist, I don't buy into the popular belief that all human life is precious and of some intrinsic worth, let alone that everybody is worthy of my respect. I think I talked a bit about that in the previous Satansplain episode. Now, this doesn't mean that I carelessly go around doing irresponsible things at the expense of others, such as cutting off people in traffic and never returning my shopping cart in the supermarket parking lot, or being really lazy and sloppy with my writing and whatnot. That's not being your own god, or being a nonconformist. That's just being a jackass. And we have certain notions explicitly in Satanism that would reject this behavior. Look at the 9 satanic sins: stupidity, solipsism, counterproductive pride, lack of perspective. You can jump around the list and, find things like that. As to the question of how much does it matter to value and respect the life of others, well, consider this page from the Satanic Bible, which I read back in the episode I did on psychic vampires. Quote, "Each person must decide for himself what his obligations are to his respective friends, family, and community. Before donating his time and money to those outside his immediate family and close circle of friends, he must decide what he can afford without depriving those closest to him. When taking these things into consideration, he must be certain to include himself among those who mean the most to him. He must carefully evaluate the validity of the request and the personality or motives of the person asking it of him." End quote. So when it comes to valuing and respecting the life of others, it depends on my own rational self-interest, really. For example, I see being courteous to my neighbors as being ultimately in my own best interest, because I would rather have a good relationship with them than a bad one. Of course, if a neighbor decides to come into my yard and trash it, well, I think the bets are off at that point. They don't really deserve my respect at all. For that matter, I refuse to be guilt-tripped into bending the knee. I don't buy into these guilt trips from other people who tell me, whether directly or passive-aggressively tell me things like, "Well, you shouldn't be able to buy this item for yourself when there are homeless children starving in the cities." Or, "Well, you have to put your preferred pronouns in your work bio or else you're being a bigot who hates trans people." No, I'm not going to live a life of servitude to every plea that comes along just because some other human out there has it bad or might have it bad. I don't care whether they try to hide behind a cross, a flag, children, the environment, or whatever. As for the next question, killing an innocent person for egoistic reasons, I guess egotistic? Anyway, I would argue there is nothing satanic about taking the life of another person purely to feed a weak ego. In fact, it sounds downright anti-satanic to me. There is nothing superior about killing somebody else to give oneself the illusion of superiority. This is why we don't sacrifice animals in Satanism. Satanism is a religion of the ego and the carnal, so killing the carnal to make up for a weak ego makes zero sense in Satanism. It's about as anti-satanic in concept as you can get. Now, another question about killing an innocent person to save a loved one. This is another one of these strange hypothetical situations that I can't imagine happening and thus don't think it's worth a whole lot of time reflecting on. But, most people, Satanist or not, would probably do that if they were forced into such a situation. But, this proves nothing. I will say that, moral dilemma questions can be good for like a philosophy class or an ethics class because, they get discussion going. It forces students to examine their beliefs, sometimes for the first time, formulate a sound argument to defend those beliefs, and so on. But otherwise, I think it can be a silly waste of time debating for the sake of debating. This notion, though, of Satanists deciding who is worth helping and when, well, it brings us to the following satanic anecdote sent in from Mark, different Mark from before. And, it's been forever since we heard a satanic anecdote on the show, so cue the Satanecdote theme song.
Satanic Anecdotes. Satanecdotes.
Mark is a musician, and he sends us the following Satanecdote from a night driving home from a show that he played. He says, I was on my way home from a gig recently. It was a cold and rainy night, and as I made my way through the streets, I noticed an elderly couple by the side of the road who looked rather distressed. I pulled over to see if I could help and discovered that they had a flat tire, but no jack in the car. No problem, I have a jack, so I opened the boot of my car and took out my guitar to get to the car jack. My guitar case has a Baphomet decal on it, which the elderly man noticed. He looked at it, looked at me, and gave a gentle wink. We got the tire changed, and the lady got into the car. The gentleman came over and said thanks, followed by, and I quote, Great to see there are still a few of us here in New Zealand, mate. You would have loved Frisco in the late 60s. It was wild. Then he tipped me another wink and a horns hand sign. Take care, boy, he said, and hail Satan. They drove off into the night, and I continued my journey with a smile on my face. What a guy. Hope you enjoyed that. It certainly made my night. Well, that was such a great satanic anecdote. I think it's a perfect place to end this episode of Satansplain. Thank you all for listening, and happy Halloween. Hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at Satansplain.com. And for more information on Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode is copyright 2024, Magister Bill M.